This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview. So, I'm Mark Fairbairn from Stockbox, and I'll be hosting the Q&A today, fielding your questions to Oliver. Now, there have been quite a few questions submitted in advance of this Q&A, and the format will be to ask those first before the Telegram admin will open the floor to allow anyone here to unmute their mic and indeed ask any questions that they have live. Or alternatively, you can simply type any questions you have in the chat, and we'll pick them up and put them to Oliver. So as always, any director or CEO is bound by the rules of the London Stock Exchange, but Oliver is here for you and the shareholders and will do his very best to answer your questions in as much detail as possible. So hello, Oliver. Thank you very much for joining us. First of all, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well, Mark. Thanks for joining as well and for helping us do this. So it's the first Q&A of the company. We've been IPO'd for just over a month now. So we put out a few good pieces of, I could say very strong pieces of news so far. So it'll be good to chat about those, and there'll be certainly further Q&As in the future here as we continue to grow and advance the company.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to do this for everyone and shareholders today. So I think there's about 8 or so questions submitted in advance. So I'll just get straight into them. So the first one I have, it says, extremely ambitious is an interesting statement. Will you describe in so far as you can what that actually means? At the same time, may we have an idea of what Mrs. Turkmani will add in advice and guidance apart from the obvious?
Okay, yeah, two-part question to start things off here. So, extremely ambitious. The reality is, as the CEO, I'm acutely aware, first of all, as to how the quality of the assets in our portfolio. That is sort of obviously with our flagship Pilot Mountain project, which hosts the largest undeveloped tungsten deposit in the U.S. Very strategic asset. We have some fantastic other assets in the portfolio. Number two, I'm acutely aware as to how well structured the company is. I think the structure of a company, especially in this space, is hugely important in terms of how successful that company can do in terms of share price. So we have 71 to 72% of our company, which is held by very supportive, three very supportive, and I think more importantly, reportable shareholders, which is obviously a very advantageous position for us to be in. And then number three, we have obviously a very strong and well-balanced management team. So with those three major factors, I'd be remiss to not be anything but extremely ambitious as to where this company could go. On top of that, Mark, I'm a young guy. I'm honestly looking to make a name for myself here in the UK. I'm fully and acutely aware that my reputation in this market and in the UK is very much tied to the success and with how I push this company forward. So the pressure is there, but I'm certainly ready for it. And the reality is, in this industry, we don't get out of bed and we don't get involved as either shareholders or as management to make 10%. If you want to make 10%, there's a lot of ways to do that. But in this space, you're looking for very outsized returns. You're looking for multi-baggers, right? That's what we're all doing here. So in order to achieve that, you need to have an ambitious CEO, an ambitious management team. And on top of that, and kind of to that end, we're not a lifestyle company, Mark, right? I can assure you that I'm not going to get rich with my Golden Metal Resources salary. I have shares at the pre-IPO level. I have shares at the IPO level. So it's really important for listeners and for potential and current investors to know that I am fully aligned with our shareholders in terms of, I need the share price to go up significantly in order to make a material amount of money here. So all those sort of factors combined should highlight to investors that I am very ambitious as to where I think we can go here with this company. And the reality is, if you have an inkling that any other company that is in your portfolio that you're investing in doesn't have a management team that is very ambitious, or alternatively isn't aligned with you as a shareholder, I would certainly be concerned about that investment. And then on the Mrs. Turkmani side of things, apart from the obvious, which I think is what you mentioned, it's important to note that Chang lives in Washington, D.C. She spends time on Capitol Hill. So, with our management team being mostly UK based and UK focused, it's really important that we have a representative in the place where ultimately these decisions regarding grant funding are being made. She's very well connected. She has a great network, and I think most importantly is she's a significant shareholder in the company now, as well as an advisor. So I think those two factors should make it very clear that it's in her best interest to help us push forward our agenda when it comes to securing non-dilutive grant funding. And so, the reality is when we have Ms. Turkmani, rubbing shoulders with people in DC who are ultimately involved with making these decisions, that's a position that we at Golden Metal Resources certainly want to be in. And just want to say as a last note here, we're very extremely happy to have Chang on board. I converse and speak to her almost daily now since she joined the company. And as I mentioned, she's very well connected, especially when it comes to lobbyists, when it comes to grant writers. And she knows the people who are best suited to help Golden Metal Resources push forward our plans when it comes to securing non-dilutive grant funding.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Oliver. Very confident start there. I like the fact that you say you're looking to make a name for yourself and you won't become rich off the salaries. So I think that aligns you very much with shareholders, and they will probably like to hear that. So thank you for that start there. So let's move on to the next question I have. So I think this is perhaps something that you said about timing for getting the Pilot Mountain resource to target, or whatever that may be, production, is less than 30 months. Is that realistic?
Oh, so first of all, I wouldn't have said that. That must have come from someone else. But in terms of 30 months, so I think the number that maybe is being quoted is the previous operator in their scope and study and in some of their reports outlined sort of a 2 to 3 year timeline to production. Now it's hard to say if that timeline is still viable. However, what I will say, and why they did quote such a very shortened timeline, it's highlighted by one of the kind of the major selling points for myself about Pilot Mountain, which is the fact that road access, power access, water are more or less things that have already been dealt with when it comes to Pilot Mountain. So a lot of projects can have a great resource, but a lot of them, just as geology is, can be in the middle of nowhere, right, where you need hundreds of kilometers of road to even get to that site. Whereas at Pilot Mountain, there's a town called Mina, which is about 30 minutes drive away by very well maintained roads. You could drive to site from Mina, obviously, as I mentioned, very very easily and quickly. There's existing power that almost intersects the property, or it comes very close. There's water within the basin, so a lot of those really long lead time items when it comes to development are dealt with at Pilot Mountain. Those boxes are already checked, which I think is why the previous operator had quoted such a shortened timeline to production. And on top of that, another way that the U.S. government is looking to support projects right now, on top of the grant funding, is they're looking to speed up permitting timelines. So the reality is, you can give a company money, but if the permit to mine or the other permits you need to actually put this into production are going to take multiple years, that is not going to allow them to solve their goal, which is to domesticate and secure the supply chain of critical and defense metals like tungsten now, like tomorrow and yesterday, right? I mean, the DoD, as of January 1st, 2026, that's 2.5 years away, is banning the imports of tungsten from China, their biggest import partner. So it just puts into perspective how paramount this issue is, and how quickly they're looking to address it. So they're also speeding up permitting timelines, which is another way we're looking to tap into this government support, is by working with those expedited permitting timelines, which once again can help speed up the ultimate path from exploration to production. And I should note, Mark, that obviously the development story and angle here is a really important one with Pilot Mountain, considering how strategic the asset is. But I would be remiss with the amount of exploration upside at Pilot Mountain. We put out a press release last week which highlighted 3 very high priority targets of which have never been drilled. So while the development story and angle is a very important one, we want to look to add considerable further tungsten, copper, silver, and zinc resources into the mineral inventory. So I would say we have sort of a dual pronged approach here. We want to continue to further de-risk the asset along that development pathway. And then on top of that, we want to make sure that we explore and expand resources and make new discoveries, because ultimately the people who invested our company are looking for an exploration story. They want a company who's going to make a new discovery, or they're going to significantly expand on what they have in the portfolio right now, looking for that big return. So there's sort of a dual pronged approach there, where we want to develop or push the development timelines forward, but also on top of that, continue to explore and to make sure that we're looking to make new discoveries on our properties, and at Pilot Mountain specifically.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Oliver. So someone was asking here, they've been looking at your desert scheelite resistivity map and the targets to explore. How accurate are these, given that the conductors highlighted that Malopo, this is of course a power metals project, didn't produce great results? Are the targets at Pilot Mountain any different to Malopo in terms of being more valuable to explorers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's important to note that Malapo Farms and Pilot Mountain are at different stages within their exploration life cycle. Pilot Mountain obviously has the in-ground resource right now. There's considerable exploration that's been done on these 4 satellite deposits. So it's hard to kind of compare apples to oranges here in terms of where these projects are at and where they're going. But what I will say is, with the maps that we've put out and the targets we've identified at Pilot Mountain, one of the huge advantages to doing geophysics on a property that has what's called drill control. So what drill control means is you have a drill intersection through a geophysical anomaly, and what you can do is you can look at either the assays from that intersection or the logs that are produced, and you can say, okay, I can, with a high degree of confidence, essentially tie up the mineralization or the lithology found within one of your drill holes to an anomaly that's associated with it. So I encourage those listening to go to our RNS again that was put out last week. And when it comes to, let's just talk about the desert scheelite parallel west zone specifically, you'll see a very considerable and well-defined resistivity low feature. And this particular feature is located 250 meters to the northwest of the desert scheelite zone. And now desert scheelite is where about 85% of the in-ground resources at Pilot Mountain is located. And if I were to turn on, and what I probably will do is in the future is put out a map showing the existing historical drilling overlaid with the geophysical results, because then investors will very quickly see that the desert scheelite resistivity anomaly that hosts the majority of the resource has considerable drill control. We have lots of drill holes into that anomaly, which we can then therefore say, okay, this resistivity feature is without a doubt caused by tungsten, copper, silver, and zinc mineralization. So the reality is, what we can then do is, because we're in the same or very similar geological terrain, is because we have that control over that anomaly, we can say, okay, well, can we see that same resistivity signature elsewhere on the property? And knowing for a fact that at desert scheelite, that exact anomaly corresponds to, I think it's 10.3 million tons of mineralized rock, we then look for that exact same signature elsewhere on the property. And lo and behold, we found that exact same signature, or almost identical signature, about 250 meters to the northwest of desert scheelite. So because of that drill control at desert scheelite, we have a much higher degree of confidence as to what that other anomaly we've identified could be caused by. And in our case, we obviously believe it to be caused by further zones of tungsten, copper, silver, and zinc mineralization. So the other, just flipping back to Malapo Farms, I mean, those conductors that were being drilled are very much real conductors, right? And the reality is, it's just that project is at a slightly earlier stage. So when you're drilling those conductors, it's higher risk, but it's higher reward. I would say, obviously, if at Malapo Farms, if one of those conductors is drilled and it turns out to be caused by massive nickel sulfides, well, that's obviously a huge result. And it's certainly a viable exploration pathway for Malapo Farms. However, just to flip back to Pilot Mountain, this project is further along, it's more advanced, so we just have a higher degree of confidence as to what the various geophysical anomalies anomalies could be caused by, which is, I think, is why the tone of the RNS we put out is so bullish or so exciting, because of that drill control, we can say with much higher degree of confidence what those other anomalies likely could be caused by, which, as I mentioned, we believe to be hopefully additional zones of tungsten, copper, silver, and zinc mineralization.
Okay, thank you for that. Just a quick follow on just from me. Will you be looking to define targets based off of this resistivity map?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of how we target those, it's pretty straightforward. If you have a look at the RNS, you'll see, at least at Desert Shielite Parallel West, there's that very well defined resistivity anomaly. It's that kind of that blue, dark blue anomaly. It's as simple as stepping back from that and putting a drill into it. It's very straightforward. So certainly all three of those targets we've identified so far will be high priority targets. So just a matter of finalizing what a drill plan could look like to target those.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, with the IPO funds raised, are GMET content to use almost all of these funds for exploration and drilling on the projects already in the portfolio? Or is some of the cash raised potentially earmarked to bring in more projects into the portfolio?
Yeah, another good question. The first thing I would say to that is we're incredibly confident with what we have in the portfolio. Flagship Pilot Mountain project, that is a standalone asset without anything else next to it in the majority of exploration in junior mining companies. So, with that asset alone, we're in a very comfortable and fortuitous position with the company. The reality is we saw some other opportunities when it came to Golconda, Garfield, and Stonewall. And we picked those up at very fair valuations, which is why we ultimately added those into the portfolio. And I think with the RNSs we put out, I think 2 and 3 weeks ago, those should highlight the potential that exists on those assets as well, specifically at Golconda Summit. Very exciting gold opportunity. Then at Garfield, where we've identified some pretty significant copper zones. So there's a lot to work on in the portfolio. We're very comfortable with the position that we're in. With that being said, we always keep our ear to the ground. With my network in the US and Canada, and with my board's network, we're often sent different exploration opportunities, and we certainly will have a look at almost all of those. We have very, I would say, specific criteria in terms of exploration potential and valuation, which is why it took us almost more than 12 months to put together the portfolio we have now. So we look at everything. If something comes along that really piques our interest, we'll certainly have a conversation. But we're very happy with what's in the portfolio now. And just another thing to note is, one thing we always are looking for as well is opportunities to increase the size of our properties by staking. Is effectively looking for new zones outside of what we have now that have considerable potential. That could be a much cheaper and more inexpensive way to expand holdings. So we're always looking for opportunities to increase the size of our existing assets, or looking at opportunities that are maybe nearby or slightly outboard of what we have now, but within sort of the same geological areas. So those are another things that we always look at, but very happy with what's in the portfolio right now.
Okay, thank you for that. So the next question I have, someone is curious as to whether the plan is to drill on the Pilot Mountain in the near term with the IPO funds, or continue with the cheaper EM work from the IPO funds to establish more drill targets, and then hopefully use grant funding to finance a bigger drilling campaign in the future.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think the first thing to note here, Mark, is I think we're in a very unique position at Golden Metal Resources, specifically within the UK market. A lot of UK companies who are focused in 95% of the jurisdictions in the world. If you're focused in Africa, if you're focused in Scandinavia or Canada or Australia, more often than not, grant funding or considerable grant funding is just not an option, because those countries don't offer it. So the fact that we are focused in Nevada, the fact that we are focused in the US, and being a UK company, the fact that this grant funding is potentially available to us means that we need to push that forward. Because if we can explore and develop Pilot Mountain by using grant funding, which is non-dilutive, which means we don't have to go to the market, we need to make sure we push that forward as hard as we can. And we are in a very fortuitous position. We have a very strategic asset in Pilot Mountain. And I think obviously the appointment of Chang as an advisor to the company should be the first signal to the market here as to how important this pathway forward is for us, and how important potentially securing grant funding is. So our ultimate goal, and as a CEO, I would love to explore and develop and drill at Pilot Mountain by using someone else's money and not having to use our precious shareholder funds. With that being said, we have considerable, drilling opportunities and drilling targets at Pilot Mountain. So what I will say is that we want to obviously make sure that we're putting our best foot forward in terms of grant funding. We want to make sure that we're turning over every stone, as one might say, in terms of the grants that are potentially available to us and the ones that are certainly available to us. So in terms of how that all kind of plays out, I'll kind of leave it at that, but certainly we'll be putting out future press releases which will highlight further details as to how the grant funding landscape looks, timelines, and what we're doing to push that forward. And those press releases will probably include some further details as to the relative timing of various exploration plans at Pilot Mountain and across the portfolio.
Okay, thank you, Oliver. So another question on Pilot Mountain. It's been said many times to be the largest tungsten deposit in North America. What have been the barriers to bring it into production in the past, and what do Golden Metal Resources intend to do differently to ensure the project delivers on its full potential? Because, of course, it does have a long history. It was originally Thor Mining, wasn't it? And just weren't able to get it going. Maybe it wasn't their focus.
Yeah, no, that's another great question, and I think it's really important for listeners to understand. And I wish I had the exact number, but there's a stat that was put out about the average amount of times a project is looked at or explored before it ultimately makes it into production. It's something, don't quote me, but it's something like 6 or 7 times on average will a project change hands before it ultimately, if it is a mineable project, makes it to the mining stage. So it may not be 6 or 7, but the important point is that the number is certainly more than 1. And it's probably around between 5 and 10. So what that means is that these projects do need to change hands. The reality is times change, right? This project has been looked at multiple times in the past. I think it's about 4 times or 3 times considerably now. And each of those times, you're right, something didn't work. So what we do and what our jobs is to look at this project and say, okay, well, what didn't work back then and why is it different now? Because if the reality is whatever didn't work back then is still going to be a hurdle or a barrier now, we wouldn't take the project on, because that would just be a fool's errand. So when it comes to Pilot Mountain, we've looked at all the different companies that had it. We looked at what didn't work. Well, one of the companies back in the 70s was looking at it strictly for its copper potential. They actually weren't interested in the tungsten whatsoever, which I think should highlight to listeners that there is obviously a very considerable copper story here as well. But that's one reason why it didn't work. When it comes to the most recent company to really push this project forward, well, there was some hurdles obviously that tripped them up. One of the main ones was the fact that company was strictly an Australian-based company. All of their contractors, all of their geologists, all the people that worked on the project, all the technical people were actually Australian-based. Or the vast majority. So effectively, they took all their geologists and they flew them from Australia to Nevada. Not only is that expensive, especially for an exploration company to fly, your teams with all their gear halfway across the world, but on top of that, an Australian geologist or an Australian mining engineer who potentially and most likely has not worked in Nevada. Nevada is every jurisdiction in the world is different. It's so different from the other in terms of geology. It's different in terms of permitting. So how are we combating that? Well, I used to live in Nevada. I used to work for Barrick Gold. I'm very well connected within the state. So we're using exclusively North American-based consultants and contractors. And actually the vast majority of who we're working with are people that are located in Nevada and have focused their careers in Nevada. So that's step one as to how we're combating that. We're not flying people from London. We're using local people who understand Nevada, who understand the geology, who understand the permitting. So that's an important thing to note here. Market conditions obviously have changed considerably. What's different now is, well, grant funding. Grant funding has never been available to this project up until the last year and a half, in the wake of the Russia-Ukraine war. So previous operators didn't have the opportunity to get funding from the U.S. government to push this project forward. Whereas to us, and now that's an opportunity for us to hopefully secure funding to allow us to really fast track exploration and development forward here. And I think another just thing that potentially other companies get tripped up by is there's too much focus on either development or exploration. I think investors who invest in development companies are looking for a certain sort of set of criteria, versus investors looking to invest in exploration companies are wanting that company to complete different things, right? So if I just say, hey, tomorrow we're going to go strictly in development, it's going to cost us $50 million, and I'm going to go to the market for it. Well, that's not going to go over well, right? Because that's a very, our investors are a lot of retail investors who invested in us because they see the exploration upside that we see. They see that we have 12.53 million tons, which is incredibly strategic and valuable, but they also see that, hey, there's an opportunity to significantly increase that in-ground resource with these exploration targets. So the way that we combat that is we push both of these different pathways forward in tandem. So what we do is we look at ways that we can de-risk the project, which is ultimately what a mining company in the future, if they were to buy us, would look at. They'd say, hey, have you done your metallurgical work? Have you done your permitting? Have you done your environmental studies? So these are all things that either have been done by the previous operator or we're going to do, because they're very important parts of the development here. They're very important parts of unlocking value here for our shareholders. But on top of that, we're pushing exploration forward. And I think with the press releases we put out so far, it should be evident how important the exploration story is. And that is us staying true to the people that invested in our company at the pre-IPO, at the IPO level, and those who are buying in the open market. They're looking for us to go and push exploration forward with the ultimate goal of saying, hey, we're going to find a way to increase, double, triple. I don't know what that number looks like, the in-ground resource at Pilot Mountain, because that is a way in which we can really unlock value and return or produce outsized returns to our shareholders. So it's about pushing both of those pathways forward, which we certainly will be doing at Golden Metal. Mark, you there? Nick or Mark, you guys there?
Yeah, I don't know what's happened to Mark. I can't hear him either. I'll just send him a WhatsApp message and see if he responds. If you just hold on for the time being. Thank you very much.
Hello? Can anyone hear me?
Yeah,
yes,
there you go, Mark.
Yes, we can, Mark. Thank you.
Oh, I don't know what happened there. Sorry, I was talking away, and I could. They said you couldn't hear me, but no, I was going. What I was saying was, it's a fact, isn't it, that it takes a number of mining companies with different approaches, different teams, different money being put in the ground to prove up a resource or get something into production. It's just part and parcel of the mining exploration cycle. And hopefully Golden Metal Resources will have that success. When you talk, Oliver, about the teams, for example, having people on the ground, do you really plan to have a little team on the ground there in Nevada and sort of play on this idea of the homegrown, American supply of tungsten, which would go down very well with America and investors over there anyway?
Yeah, I mean, all of the press releases we put out with all the work we've done has been completed with North American contractors. All the work at Golconda, for instance, we work with an ex-Newmont geologist there. He lives 30 minutes from the property. He's the main contact there. He's a Carlin type specialist. He's the one that I'm working with to push that project forward. We have a handful of different consulting teams that we work with, mostly at Rangefront, which is a consulting outfit based out of Nevada. They have almost exclusively Nevada-based geologists, engineers, field assistants, that type of thing. I have a very good relationship with them. So all the soil sampling we've done, all the staking we do is through Rangefront. So these are all Nevada guys. I mean, my girlfriend doesn't like it, Mark, because it means that I stay up late. In fact, my work day really kind of gets going. Well, it's pretty much from 8 a.m. till about 10 p.m. now, because the reality is when my guys are waking up in Nevada, it's 5, 6 p.m. here. But those are the people that are really making things tick here for the company. So we have Nevada-based crews. That's all we're using pretty much. We have a few Canadians that we bring down from Vancouver. which is a very short distance. So these are all the people that I worked with in the past, and they're excellent at what they do, and they're very critical in terms of how we push this company forward. And the success we're ultimately going to have here is in their hands, and it's my job to make sure that we're working alongside them to make it happen.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So I have about 3 more questions submitted in advance. I see there's one that has come in while we've been talking. It's still on Pilot Mountain, which is of course the flagship project, so that's good. But Pilot Mountain, the company has indicated and inferred resources at Desert Scheelite. What is required to upgrade some of these resources to the measured category? And is this something that the company sees as a high priority?
Yeah, so the way that you upgrade resources is by increasing the drill density. So just as an example, if you say have 50 meters between 2 drill holes, that could potentially lead to an inferred resource. Whereas if you then, increase the spacing or increase the density to say 25 meters between drill holes, that would allow you to upgrade the resource. So it is a priority for the company, but it's not a huge priority. The reason for that being, we're very confident with the category and with the confidence we have in the in-ground resource. The reality is when companies have their sort of initial resource estimate, as they push it forward and as they upgrade it, very rarely does that number change materially. It will change for sure. It will go either up or down, and the grade will go either up or down. But the resource that we have now, we have a very high degree of confidence that that resource exists in the ground. Like I said, it will change slightly as we push things forward and as we upgrade, but that's not a huge priority to us right now. We want to spend our money on higher impact things like drilling blue sky exploration targets or drilling for the along strike or down dip extensions of the deposit. However, as I've talked about before, there's a really important development pathway here, and part of that pathway will be completing, such economic studies as like a PEA or a PFS or an FS. And as you advance to these different studies, the resource categories become more important. So as we expand here and as we continue to push the development path forward in tandem and alongside this exploration story, upgrading the resources will become more of a priority because it will be a requirement in order to complete various studies along that pathway.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Now, as well as having, of course, the tungsten, Pilot Mountain has significant copper, silver, and zinc credits. Will modern extraction techniques allow potential recovery of these commodities as well?
Yes, absolutely. So another huge benefit to Pilot Mountain, and maybe one that people aren't familiar with, is the fact that the previous explorer and operator actually did some really advanced metallurgical studies on this project, almost to the PFS level, which is it's called a preliminary feasibility study. So the metallurgical studies that have been completed are actually quite advanced, which is really important because I've seen a lot of really great projects get pretty much stopped dead in their tracks as soon as they do metallurgical studies and realize that actually there isn't really a good way to extract whatever metal you're looking for out of these rocks. So the fact that we have very high degree of confidence, and on top of that, the recoveries and the metallurgical results have shown that it's very positive overall for tungsten, copper, silver, and zinc. So that's another kind of huge feather in the cap for Pilot Mountain. So in terms of modern extraction techniques, well, the technique isn't overly. It's called flotation, which isn't some cutting edge technology, but flotation will allow us to produce 2 concentrates, which would allow us to recover tungsten, copper, silver, and zinc. So the studies have been done to prove that all 4 metals are recoverable. What we'll do is there'll be further optimization of that. There are new technologies which can further refine your ability to recover even more metal. So that's where we stand now. We're very happy with the metallurgical results. However, there's an opportunity to further prove those, to further refine those studies, to really dial it in as to what a potential production scenario could look like and what amount of metal we could expect to recover. And just another note, and this is something that was published by the previous operator, which we haven't really touched on at Golden Metal, is there's a very significant garnet component to the resource here. Very, very high garnet grades at Desert Scheelite, and garnet is more of an industrial commodity, but with the right material and the right size fraction, garnet can actually be quite valuable. So it's one thing we're going to be looking forward here and doing further studies on, but there's potentially a fifth, I don't want to call it a metal because it's not a metal, but a fifth element or commodity here that could be of serious interest here. And as anyone listening knows, when it comes to the ultimate economics, you add up the value of the tungsten, the copper, the silver, the zinc, and in this case, hopefully and likely the garnet. Well, these are all things that will contribute to the overall economics of this project. So really happy with the metallurgical work studies done to date for recovering tungsten, copper, silver, and zinc via flotation and the production of two concentrates. And then garnet is another thing that we're going to be looking into, and hopefully we'll have some updates to the market as that progresses.
Okay, thank you. Just picking up on what you said there about flotation, is that the same way you would flotate spodumene, for example, or not? Is it a different process?
It's more or less the same. You use different chemicals.
Okay.
Those are going to float at different levels within your flotation tanks. But flotation is kind of the most commonly used method in most mining scenarios around the world.
Now, the only reason I ask that is because people will know that there was a visit recently done by me and Stopbox to a company in in Zimbabwe, and we covered the flotation process in quite a bit of detail. So if anyone would want to know about the flotation process, it is, of course, relating to spodumene and lithium, but as Oliver says, it's the same process. So it could be an interesting video for people to watch. It's on Stopbox's YouTube page. Okay, so one last question submitted in advance. Would an MOU around an offtake agreement for pilot mountain tungsten be an avenue that the company is exploring? I've seen companies in the past doing this during the exploration phase.
Yeah, so what I can say here is, it's certainly a goal of almost every advanced exploration company like Gold Medal to secure an offtake. Because it really just puts a further stamp of approval on your project. On top of that, anyone can go and look at some of the government pages that announce some of these grants, what the various requirements are. An offtake is something that they ideally want to see, and specifically an offtake with a U.S. offtaker. If you were producing metals in Nevada, but you had an offtake agreement with a Chinese company, that's not going to sit well. So they want to see offtake with a U.S. offtaker. And like I said, it's every company's goal who's exploring and developing in the U.S. To secure an offtake agreement. So with that being said, based on the above, it should be obvious that we are obviously ideally would be looking to secure an offtake agreement for tungsten. But I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, well, thank you. That concludes all of the questions that were submitted in advance. I see one that was written in the group, so I will ask that. It's relating again to Pilot Mountain. So once the application for grants is submitted for Pilot Mountain, does that mean no further exploration can be done there until the application process is complete? And if that is the case, does that mean we will do further exploratory drilling on the 3 new target areas recently identified at Pilot Mountain before the grant application is submitted?
Okay, great question. So when a grant is submitted, you are allowed to explore and develop and do anything you want on your project. It does not affect your application whatsoever. So it's important to note that, if a grant application were to be in, we can go, we're still full steam ahead, full systems go in terms of exploring on our own dime. So there's no period where we're frozen, which is good because we can allow the grant application process to play out, but also continue with our own funds to push exploration and development forward at Pilot Mountain. That's a really good question.
Okay, thank you, Oliver. So I see one other question has just been submitted. Would GMET consider a dual listing on a North American exchange?
Yes, absolutely. So, being a US focused, well, UK based, but US focused in terms of our projects, securing a US listing is certainly something that we're looking at. There's a pretty considerable investor community in the US. A lot of those would certainly and have already expressed interest in getting exposure to the largest undeveloped tungsten deposit in the US for obvious reasons. Our two high net worth individuals are located in the U.S., or two very significant investors in the company are located in the U.S. So there's certainly considerable appetite within the U.S. to get exposure to tungsten and hopefully our company. So it's pretty straightforward process to dual list from AIM to the OTC. So it's something that we're looking into, and something that would certainly be a priority, because it opens up the door to a whole other investment community. I should say our focus is on the capital market side of the business, is certainly within the UK, however, but we'd be remiss to not open ourselves up to the US, as there's obviously considerable investment capital that we could potentially tap into there. We could do it now, but it would certainly be easier and make it more streamlined if we had an OTC listing. So something that we're looking at, and maybe an announcement in the future here to outline what that process looks like, and if we're going to push that forward and what the timelines would be.
Okay, well, it will certainly entice the North American investors if they're able to easily access to get hold of shares in the company, particularly, as I say, a homegrown project like Pilot Mountain Tungsten in Nevada. So that's all of the questions that have been submitted, and I think were submitted live during the session. If anyone does have any other questions, please either type them away, or you can, I think, put your hand up in the live chat here, and we will be able to unmute you so you can ask your question directly. I'll just give another minute or so for people if they want to do that. While that's going on, Oliver, maybe you could just set out the next 6 months. We're going into the summer now. Historically, the summers, or everyone goes on holiday and the markets tend to get a bit dry, but I hope that you won't be sitting around and not taking an extended break in the summer. What are the plans for you and the team at Golden Metal Resources throughout the summer, and then I'm going into the autumn?
Yeah, good question. Hopefully no one follows me on Instagram. No, I'm just joking. No, summer. What can be frustrating about the summer is a lot of times that's when people do take time off. So to tie into the first question, I'm a very ambitious guy. So I'm the kind of guy who's going to respond to an email kind of right away, and I want a response back right away. Those timelines don't always work out because people obviously have their own needs and agendas. So we're pushing things forward as quickly as we can. Things naturally do slow down with some of the people that we work with as time is taken, which is obviously important. People need to rest as well, focus on those type of things. But we're full steam ahead. I'm working every day here. I'm going to continue working every day here over the summer, and obviously into the autumn. The grant process and how we push that forward is certainly a priority. So we're working on that. Really analyzing and taking in all those geophysical results from Pilot Mountain is a priority right now. We're obviously doing further work on Garfield Golconda in terms of what those results really mean for the company and those projects and how we push those forward. So I don't want to allude to too much here as to what's coming down the pipeline here, because we'll have to obviously put that out to the market before we can discuss it in detail. But just I want investors to know that it's full steam ahead here. Summer's not slowing us down. I'm not taking months off here to go do whatever. I'm plugged in every day, and I'm going to make sure that we're pushing this company forward really as quickly as we can here to unlock value for our shareholders.
Okay, well, thank you for that. If you could hold off on any significant announcements for the next week or so, because I am in fact on holiday, first one in 4 years, I think. But
there you go.
I'll have my equipment. And if I have to jump on, then I will. But thank you very much for your time today, Oliver. I think that pretty much wraps us up. I can't see any other questions being submitted or anyone with their hands up. So hopefully we've covered everything. Of course, this is being recorded, so it will be up online in the next day or two, so people can listen back to it. So thank you very much, Oliver Friesen, for your time today, the CEO of Golden Metal Resources.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Mark, and thanks for everyone that listened live here today. And we'll listen in the future here. And it's we're very early days in this company, but the chatter and the interest in the company at this stage already is very encouraging and flattering. And we're just getting started here. So looking forward to further Q&As. and really engaging with our investors here as we push this company forward. So there'll be a lot more from us over the summer and into the fall.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Oliver.
Okay. Take care, everyone.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stopboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.